going to go ahead and right-click or control-click on Chrome. I'm going to choose Inspect, and it's going to pull up this window, sometimes on the side, sometimes on the bottom. I'm going to move it to the bottom just so we can see it a little more readily. And I'm going to zoom in. And it's going to look a little arcane at first. And I'm going to just highlight a few of these tabs. We'll see here along the top that there's Elements, Console, Sources, Network, and a whole bunch of other things as well. This is sort of the advanced mode in Chrome. And Safari and Firefox and Edge have their own equivalents of these features. They've always been there, even if you've never clicked the right button to enable these features. And I'm going to focus for a moment on Network like this. This is a feature of the browser that's going to allow me, the programmer in this case, so the engineer, to just kind of look at what messages my browser is actually sending to a server. So let me go ahead and do something like this. Let me go ahead and visit, for instance, in my browser here. And I'm going to shrink the window just a little bit so we can see it exactly. I'm going to visit https://www.harvard.edu. And now I'm going to hit Enter. And a whole bunch of stuff just happened along the bottom of my screen. And I'm going to try to pull my window up just a little bit so we can focus on a subset of this. Let me pull this up, covering up really the content of the page, focusing on these lower level details down here. And what I want to see first is, let me go ahead and reload this page here after retaining the log so that we can see absolutely everything on the screen. And to be clear, I just checked because I forgot earlier, preserve log, because I wanted to preserve everything on the screen. I want to see everything all at once. And we'll see this. The very first line of output is completely overwhelming with detail at first glance. But what you'll see here, if I start to scroll down and down and down and down, are the so-called request headers. And let me zoom in here. And what you're seeing inside of Chrome, inside of its Network tab, in its so-called developer tools, again, this is just for engineering types, you'll see all of the headers, all of the lines of text that magically were sent by my Mac to harvard.edu, much like from Phyllis to Brian's server in that story, so I can see exactly what messages are being sent. And a lot of this we haven't talked about yet, but we do see some mention of get, and we see some mention of slash, and a bunch of other arcane details. But notice they're all sort of key value pairs, with the colon here indicating what the corresponding value is. Now, most of this is not going to be interesting, and we're not going to focus too much on the weeds of all of this, but it indeed gives us a sense of what's inside of that virtual envelope. Now, harvard.edu is one thing, but there's other websites we might visit as well. And no matter what they are, we're going to expect ultimately an HTTP response. So in addition to a computer like my Mac or Phyllis's computer sending a request containing get and host and those details too, you'll see here in my slide form just representative response from the server. And notice that key here is that the server is responding in the same version of HTTP in this example. It's sending back this so-called status code, just a numeric code that indicates, in this case, that everything's OK. And it includes this header, this HTTP header, which again is just a key value pair, saying that the type of this content that's coming back from the server is text/HTML. More on HTML in just a little bit. But for our purposes now, this just means that harvard.edu is sending me back a web page. And indeed, if we hide all of this technical stuff, that's the web page that we saw up here with all of the usual imagery and the like. And in fact, I can see this if I scroll back up, not to request headers, but response headers. You'll see up here that we get back responses, including the date that the server responded and a whole bunch of other details as well. And honestly, this has always been under your fingertips, and it will soon be useful as we start making web-based applications ultimately. But this very quickly gets overwhelming quickly. And so better than this might actually be a tool that we can use within our code space itself. So let me go back to VS Code here. I didn't open any code tabs. I'm just going to use my terminal window for a moment. And I'm going to run a couple of commands that are going to allow me to actually see what is going on when I request one website. Let me go ahead and use a command called curl for connect URL. And this is like a command line, black and white program that's going to pretend to be a browser. And it's going to connect to the URL, show me the headers, but it's not going to show me the images or the graphics, which might very well be useful to the humans, but not to me right now as the developer. So I'm going to do curl. I'm going to do -i. And then I'm going to do https://www.harvard.edu/ as though I'm pretending to be a browser requesting the home page. And what's nice about curl is albeit overwhelming 2, you'll get back a whole response from the server containing only those header values, the key value pairs inside of the envelope. And we'll ignore almost all of these, but here is the response from the server. It responded using a new and improved version of HTTP, in this case version 2, and it gave me back a 200. There's my content type, text/HTML, and then this char set happens to do with the encoding, if it's Unicode or ASCII or something else. And then there's all this other overwhelming detail for now. But this is the beginnings of my ability to just kind of poke around and see how the server works. And it turns out, too, that we'll be able to see other potential responses as well. So for instance, HTTP might not only return 100. What if I do this instead? Let me go ahead and visit curl-i http www.harvard.edu. So notice I deliberately use the insecure version of the URL, which maybe Harvard's system administration doesn't like anymore. Well, how can they ensure that I, the end user, the student, nonetheless use HTTPS, even if I didn't type it myself? Well, let me run just that command with just HTTP, not HTTPS, and you'll see that everything is not OK. It didn't come back with a 200. It came back with 301 in this message saying Harvard moved permanently. But here's where you can look for another clue. Among all of these lines, most of which I don't care about, there's a location header, colon, that's a little hint to me that says where Harvard University has apparently moved to on the web. And what's different about this URL, just to be clear? It has the S included. And what your browser will do by default, because Google and Microsoft and Mozilla programmed it this way, whenever it sees a 301 response instead of 200, it won't show you any web page. It will look for a location header, find that URL, and then automatically, quote unquote, redirect you there too. So this is why it doesn't matter what we type in the browser. Harvard can have its server send these semi-secret messages to our browsers, and then it will just visit a second URL all automatically. And you can do this with host names as well. Suppose that Harvard does not want to standardize on harvard.edu. Why? They just want it to always be www. Maybe it's a branding thing. Maybe it's a technical thing. We can see the exact same response here. This first tells me when I visit HTTP, harvard.edu with no www, Harvard minimally wants me to be using a secure connection. If I then, OK, fine, cooperate, let me go ahead and clear my screen. Let me add the S, but not the www. You can see here that it again responded with a 301 up here. And the location now adds the www. So it's just a way of bouncing users from one place to another. And this is all thanks to HTTP boiling down to relatively simple messages inside of the envelope that tell the computer, the browser in this case, how to respond. Now, odds are you've seen others besides 301, even though you've probably never seen that actual number unless you've done this kind of thing before. But there probably is a number that like everyone in this room has seen, even if you've never really wondered, why is it that number? I think you're smiling. What number are you thinking of? Yeah, so 404. Why is 404? Well, 404 indicates, by convention, not found. And now why the world decided years ago to show us normal humans on the internet 404 is anything significant is unclear. That's sort of like bad design. Like, what do I care if the status code is 404? But it's common enough on the internet that probably all of us have seen it. But that just means that some server, when you visit a URL that's incorrect, maybe it's outdated, the URL has been changed, if you see a 404, it just means that the virtual envelope that came from the server back to your Mac or PC or phone contains not 200 OK, not 301 moved permanently, but 404 not found instead. And it's usually accompanied by a technical message, maybe a cute picture of a cat sort of hiding because it means not found or something like that. The aesthetics are entirely up to the server. But that's what the 404 means. And there's other codes, too, a few of which you'll use in the coming weeks as we transition from command line programs in C and Python to web-based ones. We've seen a few of these already, and several of them are kind of variants of the same thing, like these 300 ones here. But we'll see others, like 403 forbidden means like you probably forgot to log in or you need to log in or something like that. Internal server error, right now, no. In the coming weeks, you will absolutely encounter 500 errors, and they're always your fault. It's going to be the equivalent of like a segmentation fault in C. A 500 error means like you or I screwed up when writing some code, so we're going to see that. But it's just going to be an opportunity for us to fix it. If a server's overloaded, you often see 503, like something's unavailable because something's too popular, or is maybe worse, getting attacked. This is an old April Fool's joke. 418 is not actually used in practice, but someone like took the time to write up an entire formal technical proposal so that servers can respond saying, I'm a teapot. So it's kind of part of internet lore, and there's other ones of these status codes as well. But this is useful because eventually we'll see in code you can use this understanding, high level as it might be, of HTTP to do some interesting and powerful things. So for instance, we can even send fancier URLs to servers. It turns out, as we'll soon see, if you send a message like this, get/search $Q equals cats, and then HTTP 1.1 or whatever version, and you send that message to Google server, www.google.com, this is how you can specify not just the path of a web page that you want, /search in this case. The question mark, it turns out, is going to be a convention in the internet, in the web specifically, for passing human user input to the server as well. In fact, you've probably never paid close attention to URLs, but they very often have question marks. They very often have equal signs. And indeed, even Google.com supports a certain key, Q in this case, for query. And you can put anything you want after that in order to search for actual cats. So if I actually go back to Chrome itself here for a moment, let me pull back open my Chrome browser here. Previously, I was using incognito mode for harvard.edu. I've gone ahead and closed that window and opened a new one so we can start fresh by visiting Google. Normally, you and I are in the habit of going to google.com and searching via the form. Or nowadays, you just type like your search query in the browser itself, and it brings you automatically to Google or Bing or something else. But I can really be pedantic here. Let me go ahead and zoom in, and I'll manually go to https://www.google.com/search. Q equals maybe cats. Now, this would not be a very user-friendly experience if all of us had to manually type out something crazy like that. But that's what the form is redirecting you to when you type in more user-friendly cats into like a text box. If I hit enter here, we'll get back, indeed, a whole bunch of search results about cats. If I zoom back in and maybe I change it from cats to dogs, that too is going to change. And notice it's pre-populating the text box because Google has written its code in order to do so as well. Now, apropos of the video with which we began today from yesteryear, one of the better Yale pranks over the years, has anyone actually ever been to safetyschool.org? And to our friends at Yale watching live, hi. Safetyschool.org. So it's kind of fun if you actually visit it, depending on who you are. So if I open up a new window here and I go to http://safetyschool.org, zooming in, enter, my oh my. Look at where it goes. Now, how does that, OK, thank you. This is not a CS50 thing. Someone out there who I don't know who they are for like 20 years has been paying annually for that domain, safetyschool.org, for just this joke. But if I now go back into VS Code here in my terminal window and a little more, sophisticatedly, let me do curl-i http://safetyschool.org. The browser, of course, immediately redirected me to the website. But what's going on underneath the hood? Well, 20-some years ago, someone bought the domain, configured the server quite simply to spit this out. Safetyschool.org for years has moved permanently to www.yale.edu. So just a little demonstration of what you can do with just a little bit of understanding of HTTP. That's been a lot already. We've laid the foundation for understanding how the internet works. Now we're going to use it with a language called HTML, hypertext markup language, CSS, cascading style sheets, and JavaScript, a proper programming language. But first, it feels opportune to take a 10-minute break. We have some wonderful Halloween candy in the transept, and we'll be back in 10 with those languages.
اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد رسولنا النبي الأمي المبعوث رحمة للعالمين خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين نور هذه الأمة وضياؤها وشفيعنا يوم الحساب